Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Tom Bracken. I'm the president of the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to today's forum on the election coming up. Next Tuesday, we will elect in New Jersey a new governor, the entire state legislature, and many local and county leaders also. In the next hour, we have 5 veteran journalists who are going to participate and talk about this upcoming election, hopefully taking a deeper dive into some of the very important issues that we are all very concerned about, and especially the business community. For instance, what will the next state government do about labor shortages, supply chain issues? I was very fascinated the other day by the new Monmouth poll, which now has the top areas of concern for New Jerseyans being taxes, jobs, and the economy, with COVID falling from 1st to 5th. Many things that are going to be at the top of the list for the state with the next election. And again, hopefully, whether it's Phil Murphy or Jack Chittarelli, we will be able to have our 5 journalists discuss those issues today. Before we get started, I want to make sure I thank our sponsors for today's forum: Atlantic City Electric, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, Prager Matus CPAs. Thank you very much for your ongoing support and for sponsoring today's event. And without any further ado, let me introduce to you the owner and editor of ROI New Jersey, Tom Bergeron, who will be today's moderator and lead the discussion. Tom, it's all yours.
Hey, Tom, thanks very much. I'm Tom Bergeron. Glad to be here again. Look, this is we've done this before. We'll do it a few more times. This is going to be a fun, fast-paced hour. We've told the panelists we're going to make this more like the McLaughlin group, which I think at least half of our audience will get. I remember watching that with my dad when I was quite a youngster. Always good, always excited. I have invited all of our panelists to interrupt each other if they want. So we're going to try to have fun. We've got a number of issues that we're going to go over. In addition, the chat box is up. If somebody's got a really pressing question, you can throw it up there. Maybe we'll throw it into the show. I'm going to start by having each of the panelists introduce themselves, give them 15, 20 seconds, get in, get out, and then we'll go to where we're going. We're going to start with Colleen.
Hi, good morning. I'm Colleen O'Day. I'm with New Jersey Spotlight News. I'm the senior writer and projects editor. I've been here for a decade now and been in journalism for a very long time in New Jersey.
Rhonda?
I'm Rhonda Schaffler. I also work at NJ Spotlight News. I produce and anchor a nightly business update for our 5-day-a-week show. And then on the weekends, I anchor New Jersey Business Beat. I've been with Spotlight before the merger with Spotlight for about 5 years. And before that, covered business news and economics at a number of other outlets.
And I think we all agree that Rhonda has the perfect TV voice. She's the veteran of the group. It's
very kind.
With that, I go to Stacie.
Hi there. I have the most boring background. Sorry about that. My name's Stacy Sherman. I am deputy managing editor for our U.S. bureaus at Bloomberg News. Formerly New Jersey bureau chief, always Jersey girl, always happy to talk about Jersey politics. I've been around with Bloomberg for 24 years, covering politics for way longer than that. So.
Awesome. Last but not least, my friend Daniel Munoz.
Hi, morning, everyone. I'm the State House reporter of state government politics and economic development at NJBIZ. I've been here for about 3.5 years covering that beat. I've been part of New Jersey journalism for the better part of a decade, and I've lived in New Jersey since I guess I was 2 or 3 years old. So I'm pretty connected to the whole state.
And you were 2 or 3 in what, like 1994 or something? What give us a
Yeah. I think I'm I'm the younger one, one of the few New Jersey journos in their 20s.
Wow, there you go. All right, so I'm gonna get into my inner John McLaughlin for one time, and then I'll turn it into Ted Baxter by saying issue 1, the election and the polls. As Tom Bracken mentioned, Murphy comes out with an 11-point lead in the Monmouth poll. He's essentially been in double digits most of the time. Other people are trying to say, insiders are saying it's 5 to 7%. let's just talk about polling in general. It's come under question in the last couple of elections, not due to the pollsters themselves. This is a very challenging situation to do. So I'm going to kick it to you, Colleen. Do you think it's an 11-point lead? Is that something that both sides are comfortable with? How does that go, and how will that figure for the remaining days of the campaign?
I think it's probably closer to the 9 points, which is what the likely voters show in that poll. And, you know, I think in terms of New Jersey, I don't think we're going to have the same kind of problem that we've seen at the national level polling wise, because I think a lot of folks have said that was kind of a Trump factor, that there were a lot of Trump supporters who didn't want to answer polls or didn't want to answer them accurately. I don't think we have the same feel here in New Jersey. The Monmouth poll has really been kind of the gold standard, not just for New Jersey polling, but also nationally. You know, they get great grades from 538. So I think, you know, Patrick Murray's poll is probably pretty, you know, dead on. But again, there's still a few days left, and not everyone's voted yet, although a lot of people have voted early, close to 500,000 so far. So, you know, it can tighten up a little bit, but I don't see it getting too much tighter than it is, you know, right now.
Daniel, what do you hear from the two sides when you talk to them?
I think both candidates want to run like they're the underdog. I think Murphy said we're running like we're 10 points behind. I do think it is in that sort of 7 to 9% range when you consider the margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points. I think Murphy is certainly acting like he's behind, giving the sort of the all-star Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, Jill Biden, and Kamala Harris crew that's been coming out to support him these past few weeks. So I think the governor is really pulling out all the stops.
You know, that's a great point. And Stacie, I'm going to go to you because you can bring a little bit of a national perspective. I know the Virginia race is a lot closer, but you guys are seeing all of that. When you bring in the big ones like that, does that mean, is that shoring up support, or is that cause for concern?
I didn't hear you. When you bring in the what? I'm sorry.
When you bring in the big guns like the Biden and the Obama and Jill Biden and a lot of the people that he brought in, is that a warning sign, or is that a cherry on top?
It's common. I mean, it's very common to bring in the big guns. It's hard to tell, and it's a tough year because Biden he's actually has more people, more disapproval than approval in New Jersey, which is rare for a Democratic presidential candidate. So they made a point of saying that his visit in New Jersey was not a candidate stop, it was for infrastructure. So it remains to be seen how bringing in national candidates whether it will help or hurt Murphy. It's at the same time, the election, it's all about turnout. It really is. Last election, it was, I think, 38% turnout for the last governor's race. So it really just depends on, you know, which candidate can bring people out to the polls. And that's one of the reasons that I think Murphy is saying, you know, acting like an underdog, because if he acts like he's confident, then people won't go to the polls. So he wants people to go to the polls.
So here's what Murphy's not acting like, the best I can tell. He's not acting like he's killing it on business, even though he is. So I'm going to turn to Rhonda here. And I just wrote down the Hub, Fiserv, Hacks, WebMD, Freshly. We had the news come out yesterday about Netflix. This is a governor that in the last 6 months has been killing it economically. Most governors would be touting this in their reelection. And we're hearing more on the COVID and less on that. Talk a little bit, Rhonda. First of all, isn't the governor on quite a business roll here the last month?
We certainly have seen a lot of announcements and a lot of emphasis, even just kind of to shore up businesses with some of these EDA programs we've seen over the last couple of months. But, you know, I think some of those recent announcements are interesting, but the jobs aren't here yet, right? There's shovels in the ground at the Hub. It's a photo op. There's not people. There's not a building. So a lot of these announcements, while they're positive, it's not like we've seen them come to fruition. I think also the issue of corporate tax incentives, even though we have a new program in New Jersey, it's really left a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths from what happened before. So you're still enticing people. People just aren't wandering over the border and saying, wow, it's great to be here. And it's been a really tough time for businesses, and you have businesses who are still really struggling. So I think if he campaigns too much on that, he might open himself up to criticism. We also have an unemployment rate that's higher than the national average. So it's a tricky area for him. I think all of those announcements he's hoping will help, and they're very future looking. But what's happening in the here and now, I think he might be open to some criticism on by those who are not satisfied with the business climate right now. And we hear over and over again that people are not fully satisfied with the business climate.
Colleen, is that what you're hearing? I mean, we're talking about Fiserv is an additional 2,000 people. Hacks is 100 great companies. The hub is who knows how much that's going to be. Freshly, the governor is going to get a couple hundred people to go into Cumberland County. That alone is a huge win, but it's just not coming up much. Is what Rhonda's saying? Is that what you're hearing on the reluctance to get too much into business?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rhonda makes great points there that the jobs aren't here yet. And Chitterelli certainly has more of a, I think, pro-business agenda in terms of his platform. So I think that would be a place that he could hit Murphy on, more. Murphy also, though, I think is trying to play to the real Democrats base and emphasize things like the social programs, like, he wants to get women out to vote. So that's why he's been talking a lot about, bringing back, even though it's only $7.5 million, but restoring funding for the women's health programs. That's been more of his focus. A stronger, fairer. He wants to really get the middle class, whoever we are, right, out to vote. And so that's why I think he's focusing more on those issues than the business side.
All right, so I'm going to turn to Stacie, my favorite time life operator here, and let's combine the two. You've got Murphy, the business ones, not wanting to touch about it. Chitterelli has some really strong business proposals. I'll just list one: cutting the CBT in half over 6 years. He's talking about, it's not like we want to compete with New York and Pennsylvania. He's saying we want to compete with Tennessee and Georgia and Texas and California. I want to bring back the New Jersey that just kicks butt the country that you had with Bell Labs in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. But yet he's not mentioning that either. Both debates rarely didn't bring up a business issue. Why isn't Chitterelli bringing that up? Is he leery because of Murphy's wins? It just seems like business are topics that nobody wants to touch. What are you hearing?
Well, I think cutting the corporate business tax in half over 6 years, I think we've all heard it. We've been around a long time. We've heard candidates they can say anything during the race. It's what you can actually do, and cutting a tax in half means cutting spending as well. And so if he's going to highlight that, he's going to be asked, well, where are you going to cut, or how are you going to do that? And I haven't heard the details of that. So I think that's kind of it. Like, if you push, a tax cut, you're going to have to say how you're going to pay for it. And so I think that's kind of the issue there.
Well, I've been around enough elections to know that the answer to this question is very easily. One, we're going to close loopholes. Like, there's all these billion-dollar loopholes we all know about, and oh my gosh, maybe we should close them at the last minute, right? That's one. And then the other, we're going to let those big, bad, mean people pay their fair share, right? So once we do that, then we'll have money for everything. So I think that'll be what is coming. Daniel, let me go to you, all sarcasm aside, comparing the business platforms for both candidates and the reluctance to talk about it a little bit during the election. How do you see that playing out?
Oh, I did ask Chitterelli about this following the debate, that if the governor doesn't have this pro-business climate, then how do you have all these wins with Pfizer and the hacks? And he's saying that the state is fronting so much cash in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and that for a state to have to do that with offering all these tax breaks isn't really a competitive environment. And so when he says declare economic war and compete with Tennessee and those states, that means having a tax and regulatory structure that businesses will want to just go to those kinds of jurisdictions without having to offer enormous tax breaks to those companies.
So
I'm sorry, you told me to butt in.
No,
If I-
jump
if
in,
I-
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, Dan makes a really good point in that for a state that offers so many tax incentives, you have to ask, why do they need to offer tax incentives, right? Like if the state, shouldn't a company with a lot of money just move to a state without tax incentives? And so the fact that we have to offer tax incentives begs the question, why do we need to? We shouldn't have to.
Right.
Well, and that begs the question, and it came from my friend Walter, who I knew was going to pop up in the chat box here. Why are we spending the Federal CARES Act money to rebuild the UI trust fund, right? I mean, he's committed to no new taxes. Again, I have not heard Chitterelli talk about that either, but a lot of states have used some of that money to up the fund. And I guess we've spent all ours, sarcasm alert. Nobody knows what he's going to do with that, but he said all options are on the table. I will say that my reporting, I have yet to find one person who said there's been a substantial discussion about using any of the CARES Act fund for the UI trust fund. Talk about that as an issue for the candidates. And is that something that the general public, look, our audience cares about it, the people on this webinar care about it, but is that something you're really going to score points with by saying you're going to replenish the unemployment fund? Anybody?
Yeah,
I think that is
that's the problem. Oh, sorry, Dan. That's the problem, is that, when you're running a campaign, you are looking for sound bites, you're looking for quick hits, and you're looking for pretty easy things that people can understand. And the UI fund desperately needs to be replenished, and as does the whole system that we use to process claims. And there, as does the DMV system. There are so many things, but they're just really hard for, I think, you can't get through them very quickly as a soundbite, and I think they can be hard for the public to get their heads around. So you don't emphasize those things.
Plus, if you don't make the decision on it before the election, you're not going to get one group upset, right? Because there were those hearings where some people were able to give their input, but no decision was made. They're still thinking about it, and that way, everybody wants more money, certainly the groups that went forward. So, and in some ways, given the need, everyone's got a valid claim to make. But that unemployment trust fund is a huge issue. And I think what the business community really doesn't like about it is, again, it's layering yet another cost for them on top of the CBT, surcharge and everything else.
I think a number of businesses, I think a number of businesses have floated that proposal to the Murphy administration, and in their responses to my inquiries, I think other journalists have seen this as well. They haven't really said one way or the other if they're going to do that. I know a number of Senate Democrats and Assembly Democrats have supported it. I do want to sort of bring up a related point that a lot of the federal funds, Republicans have accused administration of using or administration and Democrats of using a lot of the federal funds and surplus money towards, I guess, Christmas tree spending, sort of pork spending. So there is sort of this accusation of mismatched priorities from lawmakers, from Democrats, both in the governor's office and in the legislature.
All right, so I'm going to give the contrarian view on funding the business and the Unemployment Act. And it would be very easy for the governor to look at all of these wins that, this is, well, again, if taxes are your issue, this isn't the state for you, right? We've heard the soundbite, but at the same time, we've had a number of companies that are saying, no, we want to come here. The workforce is here. They've been overwhelming about how great our workforce is, which is great. And more than that, look, let's give the governor some credit. He talked about bringing innovation back and being the innovation state. And most of the wins that we just talked about have been from the technology angle. And people have said, look, that aside from logistics and Amazon and all of that, which is heavily with data and technology too, this has been a big win for us, the innovation state campaign. Again, not campaigning on it, but Murphy seemed to make a lot of wins here. Rhonda, are we getting back to where, we're not the medicine chest, but we might be the computer chip chest of the country? It seems like innovation is really coming.
Yeah, I agree with you that emphasis does seem to be paying off. I mean, I think it's on a small scale now, but I think it's interesting. And if you look at a state like Massachusetts, which also has some cost issues, they have been able to do that effectively. But what I think is even more interesting than what is happening at the state level is just kind of at the grassroots level. If you look at the entrepreneur venture capital scene in Newark, for instance. So I think that there's been almost a ripple-on effect that is positive. And, I think that I would put that in the win column as an attempt to move our economy in an interesting direction. And certainly, to your point, some of these efforts, while we're not fully seeing them pay out yet, might. And I think it's smart because when you think of the innovation technology economy, rather, you think of STEM, you think of all of our great universities in the state, our highly educated workforce. I mean, it plays in very well to some of the resources that we have here already.
Let me go to you, Stacie. Is that what the state's becoming known for again? Are you seeing that the innovation and the technology is in fact coming back a big way?
I don't know if that's what New Jersey's known for. We're still the butt of way too many jokes. But I think it could go in that direction. I think we are known, as Rhonda said, we're known for great schools, for a highly educated workforce, for innovation. And I think Governor Murphy is trying to benefit from that. And I think there is a lot of potential with the announcements announced recently. I think there's a lot of potential. The only thing, they're startups. Startups take a while to come to fruition. So it's just something you have to wait and see whether they're going to bring jobs and revenue. So, but he's made a lot of really good announcements lately.
I have to agree. I think a lot of these incentives, a lot of these companies moving to New Jersey, these take years to have sort of a substantial change. I guess, for example, under the prior set of tax breaks approved under Governor Christie and sort of the hundreds of millions of dollars that went to Camden companies, that could take decades to really build the city back to what it was, I guess, before its economic decline. So a lot of these announcements are really photo ops and potentially sound bites and press releases that could potentially get attention then and there and potentially be used as talking points. But these things take many years to really take a hold and have their intended benefits on the state economy.
Awesome. All right. So if there was a big convention, if there was a big event and Murphy was speaking, everybody was chanting 4 more years, right? 4 more years. So let's talk about, from a business standpoint, what we think 4 more years under Murphy, the presumed winner, but we'll see what happens. What will that mean? The economy, look, we'll talk about the jobs piece in a second because we're way behind on that. We'll talk about the affordability issue because that's always going to be an issue. But as far as what he wanted to do with an innovation economy, new incentives that were bringing new things, he's had a lot of wins here. There doesn't, for the business community to help out employment tax and the CBT, but that's not going to be a big issue among the regular voters and the regular non-business people. Where do we think we're going to go with 4 more years? And in theory, he's going to be emboldened to keep on with what his economic plan has been. And look, let's be fair. It's easy to say that his economic plan has been a big success at this point. So let me jump into that, Colleen. Where do you see 4 more years of what the administration will try to accomplish?
I think if we're talking from a business standpoint, I see him just kind of moving in the same direction. I don't see certainly continuing to emphasize the innovation economy. There's also been an effort on the administration's part to kind of try to find out where the future of work might be. So perhaps trying to make some changes there in terms of innovating and seeing what, preparing people for the jobs that might be there in the future. We've talked about people losing jobs to computers in all sorts of ways and trying to make sure that doesn't happen. He's put a lot of emphasis on training that is not necessarily 4 years of college, but some job training. So I think that he's going to try to continue to move in that direction as well.
All right, Daniel, if we're having this conversation 4 years from today, and we're talking about the achievements of the second term of Governor Murphy on the business, what do you think we're talking about?
Well, I guess that is the problem. What is he going to do on the business front? I think with talks about these national aspirations, I think it would be more on the social front, not to take a ding at those social issues, but I think the things that could frame him as a more progressive person, somebody who's deserving of, say, national aspirations, those are sort of the issues he's going to go towards. I think he's going to continue much of the same, trying to continue implementing and rolling out sort of these higher education, affordable job training programs, putting the incentives to use. A lot of the tax break programs were approved pretty late in his term, so we're dealing with trying to get those implemented. So real estate or development, community development, corporations, film and television production. So it's going to be just, I think, implementing a lot of those programs and seeing how they take hold.
I would agree with that, actually. I think that, that's one thing that's interesting. We haven't heard the big what's going to happen. And that's why I, too, think it is going to be more of the same. And I think to Daniel's point, that Economic Recovery Act of 2020, he will want to see how that plays out. And so in a way, he can look backwards and say, listen, we have all these new programs. Let's see where it goes. And I think that's why you haven't seen any, big, bold announcements. It's just more of the same, in my view.
Stacie, to you, and Daniel made a great point about him being the progressive leader in some of the social issues. And I'll bring up, I think Steve Fulop is a wonderful poster child of being both very progressive socially, but also very pro-business and everything he's been able to accomplish in Jersey City. Is that the same Murphy playbook? He prides himself on being the most progressive governor in the country, but at the same time, if he does have future aspirations, people are going to look to that and also look to the business front. Is he able to juggle that? Is that something that's working for him?
I think that is the spiel he's giving. We interviewed him last week in Newark, and which, by the way, so much construction is going on in Newark. I was amazed. Really, so much is going on there, and that's a really positive sign. I couldn't even walk through on a sidewalk. I just had to get around. There was so much going on. But one of the things that Governor Murphy stressed is this value for your money, but also values. He said that people will come here for value and values, where he was comparing New Jersey to a Texas or a Georgia, where they have Republican governors, and there's these social issues right now with abortion and voting rights, and how perhaps employees might come to a place like New Jersey where they agree with the values. I don't know if I don't know if I buy that argument, but that is the argument. Are people coming to New Jersey, as opposed to going to Texas? I mean, right now, people are going to Texas. They're migrating to a place like Texas where it's low cost. But eventually, the question is whether values will become an issue that's, for businesses and for employees.
Colleen, let me turn to you on the value question, because one thing that I found interesting throughout the campaign, and look, we get the literature and we know a lot of it is copy and paste, and you just replace the candidate's name, and there's all of the familiar phrases that you're going to use. But both sides have been, to some extent, trying to describe the other one as extreme. They're extreme on masks, or they're extreme on vaccination, they're extreme on women's health, they're extreme on this and that. I don't view us as being an extreme state. Some of the states that Stacie just mentioned there, where you have some real hardcore battles on both sides, from Board of Education to health issues to all kinds of concerns. I think we're generally, even though it's more blue than red, I think both sides are closer to the middle. I can't paint Chitterelli as a Trump person. He clearly is being more to the middle. And I think even Murphy to some extent. Are we an extreme state? Is that something you can run on, calling the opponent extremist?
No, I mean, we certainly aren't an extreme state, but they're trying to play to these, the folks who are remembering the 2020 presidential election, and which of course ran on for, it seemed like it was 4 years, but it seemed like forever. I think one of the things that is just interesting about this is when you look at the abortion issue in particular, because Chitterelli brought up at both debates, and he's brought up elsewhere, this idea that, you know, we don't want this Reproductive Freedom Act, which is currently pending. It's something that's going to come up in the lame duck, probably not going to pass the way that it's written right now, but saying that, oh, this is terrible, this is extreme, we're going to let abortions happen in the, you know, 7th, 8th, and 9th months. New Jersey currently has no restriction on abortion. You could have an abortion at any point. So that's nothing new. But then we get into this whole question of who wants to have an abortion in the 7th, 8th, or 9th month? Women just don't do that unless there's a reason for it. So I think the abortion issue kind of really is, you know, an example of this whole question about extremism when we're looking at both sides of a question, and how the candidates are trying to turn this into something that really is not, you know, it's no big deal.
Does anyone think Murphy's handling of the long-term care situation and or COVID in general, does anyone think that that has been a defining reason that people are voting for one candidate or the other? It's got a lot of talk. Is that something that anybody thinks is number one on the voters' minds? And Tom Bracken talked about what the polls indicated.
It certainly helped surge his polling of, say, this time last year, maybe May, April last year, sort of that rally around the flag sort of mentality in effect. I think Christie enjoyed that following Sandy. Rudy Giuliani and George W. Bush enjoyed that following 9/11. The speculation, the expectation was that as COVID became sort of an endemic, sort of a more of a background issue, that these issues like taxes and the economy would sort of take forefront again. And we're seeing that with sort of a closing gap between Murphy and Chitterelli, and people thinking that Chitterelli would be better suited to handle things like lowering taxes and building a more pro-business environment.
It's just, it's happening. Yeah, it's happening late is the problem. I mean, I guess it's a problem all along. It's good that we're getting to this point, hopefully now for good, where cases are down and hospitalizations are down, and that we can, you know, continue to go back to normal life, or people can go back into their offices, because so many people still are not. But because it's happening now, as opposed to, let's say, a couple of months ago, you would have had maybe more of a discussion about taxes, and maybe you know, there'd be more emphasis on property. The property tax in particular for voters has always been, you know, the key issue. It is starting to come to the fore, but probably a little late for Jack Chitterelli.
So let's go to one of the issues that came up here and talking about vaccines in the workplace, right? Let's turn to workplace environment. Vaccine mandates. We've all seen a couple of headlines in the last couple of weeks about certain organizations that have dismissed X number of workers because they didn't get vaccinated, excuse me. And while a lot of companies have put in a mandate, and I've seen someone just put in a mandate that you have to get your booster shot now, that doesn't seem to be a huge issue from what my reporting has seen in the workplace. It doesn't seem to be as big a fight here as it is in other states. Is anybody hearing, when you're talking to the business community, the idea of a business themselves putting in a mandate, or the governor or the legislator putting in various types of mandates for various classifications of workers? Is this a big issue in the business community?
Well, generally when I've spoken with lawyers, employers can require this, and it seems that, well, if you don't get the vaccine, then you have to do testing, you have to work from home, so there are accommodations in place.
God forbid. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I've working from home. Oh dear, humanity. Working from home, but I think it sort of was attention grabbing in the summer when cases were surging, and you heard media reports of hospitals in the southwest, the south, like east of Florida, just being completely inundated. But it seems sort of a background issue, like mass people sort of grumble with, I'll get the shot because my boss says I have to, or my boss I'll get a $250 bonus to do this. So it seems to have been a background. It seems to have kind of taken a background issue and hasn't been quite the wedge issue it was a couple of months ago.
I would agree with that. I mean, I just think given where our vaccination rate is, I mean, I do think it's interesting, on the national level, there are business groups, lobbying groups kind of asking for, there was a report that they're asking the Biden administration to delay workplace vaccine mandate implementation. There's a need for some guidance that businesses are facing. And I think where businesses are concerned is it ties back to the labor issue. If you are having trouble staffing and you lose a couple employees because they don't want to get vaccinated. But to Daniel's point, if you offer testing, there seems to be workarounds that make it less of a concern in our business community.
Is anyone hearing of a situation, and I hear rumblings of this, of, okay, well, if you don't get vaccinated, you have to get tested, and sometimes it's once a week, sometimes it's twice a week. But saying you have to do it and have somebody actually do it are often two different things. Do we really believe that a lot of these people who have chosen not to be vaccinated are in fact being tested twice a week? Is anyone hearing any rumblings on whether it's don't ask, don't tell, sort of, to use a phrase?
I'll tell you, my company, Bloomberg, I have to get tested, and the test goes right into the system. And if I don't get tested, I can't walk into the office. And I suspect a lot are doing that as well, or they might not have Bloomberg's money, but to do that. But I think it's just, there is such a balance right now, and it is a safety issue. You don't want people, getting sick on the job. I mean, we are dealing with a labor shortage everywhere, and it is a balance, right? You don't want to fire people or lay them off. You need them, but at the same time, you don't want people getting sick. So there is no great answer. There's no great solution, but so far it seems to be working. This balance of the test or get vaccinated seems to be most common approach that companies and employers are taking.
I think one of the
Go ahead.
Sorry. I think one of the complications though with testing, and I've spoken with attorneys about this, when you're storing workers' medical data, you have to be very careful that you make sure that it's secure software. You have to really be careful and deliberate with who has access to that, because if that gets out to somebody it's not supposed to be, and you're leaking workers' medical data to people who aren't supposed to see it, that is a huge legal liability, and that causes all sorts of headaches for employers. So businesses have to be very careful with how they handle and store that data and who's able to access that data.
All right, so I'm going to transition into our next topic, and I'm going to do it this way by saying the five of us here, the five journalists, we have a couple things in common. One, we were all journalists, but two, more impressively, we all wanted to come to work today. We actually like being employed. As journalists goes, we don't necessarily like 9 in the morning, but all of us have jobs and we go to them, and so many people who are watching this are saying, man, just have someone who would show up. People have talked about it throughout the webinar. This is the big elephant in the room going forward. Our unemployment rate is still higher than the rest of the country. The idea that the fight that came about raising the minimum wage now looks silly. We're at, I think, officially $11. I saw another announcement just today. Costco's at $18. Bank of America is going to be $25. You can pretty much go to any fast food restaurant and pretty much tell them, I need $15 and I'm going to work here. And they're going to say yay or nay. I mean, people are paying money to have workers, yet they still can't find anybody. We still have a worker shortage. We still have unemployment issues. And it's not like they're waiting for that extra $600 or $300. That's gone. The situation is still here. So I'm going to ask the four of you to solve something that not a single politician or business leader has been able to solve in the whole country. What do we got going on here? It's not even the Great Resignation. I just call it the Great Indignation towards work in general. Nobody seems to want to work anymore. How are we going to change that?
It is a problem. I think we've heard sort of this rhetoric of, well, if you don't like your fast food job, you should get a better job. And people are doing that. Now there's not people to work in fast food. I think it is sort of this conscious shift on the future of work that I think is taking hold across the country. I don't think this is something that Phil Murphy or Jack Ciattarelli by themselves and their administration will be able to handle, because this is sort of a historical pivot in how we think about work in relationship with our workplace and sort of the work-life balance. I unfortunately did not offer a solution. I'm just laying just how contextualizing just how historically unique the situation is.
All
Yeah,
right,
I'll
I'm
jump
gonna
in.
oh, go ahead, Stacy.
I'm just going to jump in and say I have no solution either. I really thought I thought when the checks, the $300 check stopped, that people would go back to work, and that has not happened. I mean, you go to my local restaurant, there's like 2-hour waits when there's usually you can just walk right in. Doctor's offices, or it's taking forever to get appointments. It is everywhere, and it is when does I don't have an answer. I don't really get it. I don't know. I've worked since I was 15. I can't imagine not having a job, and I'm grateful for my job. I don't know where all the people are. So.
Okay, I'm going to offer a solution a little bit, or at least where businesses have to start thinking. I'm not going to oversell it though, but I agree this is the most fascinating story that we'll be reporting on. I think it is a shift. I think there was a reprioritization during COVID on a number of different levels. But I think what you're seeing is that for the first time in a long time, business does not have the upper hand over labor. And we really have not been in that position for a long, long time. So what you're seeing is a business saying, you want to work from home 2 days a week and come back 3 days a week. That's fine. You want to do your job in Iowa? That's fine. I mean, I think businesses are rethinking what it actually means to have a workforce. They have to make it desirable for their employees to come back. Now, certainly for lower income jobs, that's kind of a separate situation. But I'm talking, there are people that have just decided to retire early, or they don't want to go back to a 5-day-a-week job. And so there was some sort of shift during COVID. And I think the way businesses are responding is, as Tom mentioned, pay, but that's hard to do, especially in this environment. So they have to look at, how am I going to make my employee want to come to work every day? Because if I'm saying you come in 5 days a week, but my competitor says you work from home 2 days a week, I might lose them. So I think businesses are really trying to do a big rethink of what their employees want and how they're going to attract and keep them. I think it's just one of the other many difficulties businesses are facing right now.
Colleen, you want to jump in on this one?
I was going to ask a question rather than give it.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, but I wonder.
Now I'm out of a job.
Sorry, Tom. I haven't heard this, but has anybody heard, is Return and Earn working at all? I know it's only been about a month, but have any of you guys heard? Is that a good,
I mean, the governor, remember he announced that the numbers, there were some quick signups on that, so that the numbers were strong just from interest from business. And so I do think that's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting idea, certainly from the business perspective. If it's expensive to train employees, so if you're going to get money to train them, I can see why it's desirable. But I remember the governor's press conference shortly after it was announced that they gave some early numbers that they were seeing some decent signups in their view.
I think it's interesting that it's all an experiment right now. The governor's been asked why he hasn't spent all the ARP funds yet. And his answer has been like, he's trying to figure out what will get people back, right? What will boost the economy? So he's going to try Return and Earn and then see if it works. And if it works, he'll put more money towards it. And so instead of spending it all, this is what he says. So instead of spending it all, because he really doesn't know, do grants work, do incentives work, does cash work? So it's just, everyone is trying to figure out the same thing, how to get people back to work.
I think I interviewed a number of business owners and economists. There's more skepticism and pessimism than there is optimism that it would work. I think the governor gave this peculiar example where somebody's making $10 an hour washing dishes and they take part in the Return and Earn program and advance their career, then that restaurant where they were washing dishes still has the labor shortage. So it's still an issue.
Hey, let me just jump up. I grew up in restaurants and fast food and this and that. Those are great jobs. They teach a lot. I'm grateful for them. I'm pushing my kids to all do them. It's always disturbing when it almost seems like we're looking down on those jobs. Those are the bedrock of our economy, and they build people for work ethic for the future. You know, I tell all of my kids, you know, get your butt up to Wendy's and let's go. Learn to be on time. Learn to talk to customers in an appropriate way. I hate that people are flooding away from those jobs or view them as anything other than productive part of society. But that's my little soapbox here for a second. We're running out of time, so I want to go to issue 8, our last issue. If there's one thing that the employers out there can't find more of than employees, is they can't find product, right? We had a wonderful story on the Christmas tree guy. He was saying, if you get a Christmas tree, you better get it early because they're on boats, they're in China, they're here, they're there. We can't get the shipping. You know, you're starting to see some of the stories with the empty shelves. I kind of feel like those are a little forced and fake, to be honest. But you're starting to see some problems with the supply chain and product. That is going to be something that I think everyone is going to notice. It was unbelievable. Even at the heart of COVID, last March, last April, we still had, for the most part, other than toilet paper and paper towels, food on the shelves. Talk about the idea of going forward for whoever wins, the idea of getting that supply chain working and how that could be a huge problem for the state.
Well, I think
Good
like
start.
oh,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Dan.
Stacie.
I think like with sort of the Great Resignation, we've had sort of decades or generations of problems and strains on the global manufacturing and supply chain. I think like with the Great Resignation, COVID has really became sort of the straw that broke the camel's back and pushed it into unsustainable territory. So it's to the point where long-term fixes that have been identified in manufacturing and logistics and trucking and supply chains need to be rectified.
This is just a huge national issue that we're following. I'll just be a data nerd for a second because GDP came out this morning and it was like growth was way slower than expected. I think it was 2% in the quarter, and the quarter before it was 6.7%. So the issue is we have all this demand right now, but we can't meet it with transportation and with supply. iPads and iPhones are in short demand. That is like the most popular item, and you might not be able to get a new iPhone for Christmas. I mean, it's huge, and they have to figure out. I think they will figure it out. We're at this strange in between. I think through the end of 2021, the supply chain issue is going to be major. We're going to have to figure it out. I think they are taking steps to figure it out, but for the next couple of months, I think it's going to be a really big issue.
You know, the viewers are chiming in here and they're all making great points. Again, I'm going to be out of a job on the next one here because they're thinking they're smarter than I am. We can talk about workers, we can talk about supply chain until we solve the childcare issue. I don't know that anyone's going to be able to solve it. And I was talking to a CRE person the other day and said, just imagine a big building. On the bottom floor, you're going to have a health organization, a couple of doctors, a couple of nurses, and you're also going to have a childcare setting. What employer wouldn't be looking to get to a building like that? Childcare issues are certainly going to be huge going forward. All right, it's 9:52. We're starting to come to the top of the hour. We're respectful of the time. Those who have seen me do panels know I love the lightning round, so I've been holding everything back here. We're going to go to every person. They're going to get one word, one phrase. Someone's going to overtalk. We'll see it. That's all good. But I have 6 questions, and I'll admit our panelists were prepped ahead of time. We just want to get quick thoughts on where we're going on a couple of things, and it'll be interesting to see what people pull up. I'm going to call on people randomly in no particular order, which is, of course, the definition of random, and we'll go from there. All right, number 1, Murphy's biggest success in the first term. Rhonda.
I think that would be kind of advancing the fairer part of the Stronger and Fairer pledge that he made, whether it was minimum wage, whether it was paid sick leave, whether it was making sure your NJ transit tolls didn't go up.
Colleen.
Minimum wage.
Stacie.
I think his COVID leadership.
Daniel.
I'd agree, COVID.
All right. Chitterelli, biggest success on the campaign trail. We'll go backwards. Daniel.
Advertising himself as sort of the pro lower tax candidate. That was a weird, wonky way I worded it, but
Stacie,
I think his ads, this if taxes are your issue, you don't belong in New Jersey, those really resonated.
Colleen,
His personality, his ability to connect with people.
Rhonda.
I agree with Stacy on that one.
Murphy's biggest failure in the first term. We gave his biggest plus. What has been his biggest weakness? Colleen.
This is really wonky, but he made a big deal about the public bank in his first campaign, and it's dead. So I'd say that.
Daniel.
I'd agree. I think a lot of people fault Murphy for businesses, sort of the business situation with how they suffered during COVID.
Stacie.
I think taxes is a failure to really reduce the cost of living in New Jersey.
Rhonda.
Tagging on to Stacy, excessive spending.
Man, I'm going to be McLaughlin here and say you're all wrong. The answer is cannabis, which he made such a big deal about. To get all this money, and not totally through his failure alone, but that was one of the issues that, other than NJ Transit, which he's still going to fix no matter if it kills him, cannabis was a big issue, and I don't know that he's necessarily done that. Chitterelli, biggest failure in the campaign. Stacie.
His failure to really distance himself from Trump, I think.
Daniel.
I agree. He's really had to moderate his views in order to not appear as too radical or too pro-Trump candidate. And that's really shooting him in the foot.
Rhonda.
I hate to say ditto, but I'm going to. I think that was the issue.
Colleen, one-word answers are fine. Colleen.
And not getting his message across to voters.
All right, lightning round number 5. If Murphy is reelected, his biggest push in the second term will be what, Rhonda?
Stronger and Fairer Part 2.
Daniel.
Hopefully the stronger side.
Colleen.
More progressive social programs.
Stacie.
I'm going to say jobs, getting more jobs.
If Chitterelli is elected, the biggest change that people in New Jersey, business people will see will be what, Stacie?
I think there will be lower business taxes.
Colleen.
Yeah, lower business taxes and a more friendly business climate.
Rhonda.
I have to say ditto again. You got to come to me first.
Daniel.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
All right, last question. We've got all this gambling in the state, so I'm going to create my own over-under line, which if you don't understand how the gambling works, you can bet on a game. You can say the Giants are favored by 7. Ha ha ha. Do you think that they'll win by over that amount or under it? So I'm going to put the over-under on the re-election at 8 percentage points. You guys have to say whether Murphy will win by more or less, and if you think Chitterelli will win, then jump on there. Rhonda, over-under.
I like that number, 8%, so I'll go just slightly over.
Daniel.
I think we're certainly in single digits, close to double digits, 8 or 9.
So did I hear over?
Over.
Or a push, as we like to say. Stacie.
I'll go over.
Colleen.
Oh, all right. I'll say slightly under.
All right. So the only poll we have left is to determine if me, your friendly moderator, was more John McLaughlin or more Ted Baxter. You can talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to kick it to Tom Bracken. We're at 9:57. Tom, you got 2 minutes. These people have jobs to get to. Let's go.
Thank you, Tom, and Colleen, Rhonda, Stacie, and Daniel. You knocked the cover off the ball. I really think this was very entertaining, very topical. Didn't always agree with the answers, but that's the way New Jersey is. It's a state where you respect differing opinions and you would agree to disagree. But great job by all of you. Thank you very much for being here today. And we really do look for your comments over the next couple of days and after the election as to what we can anticipate once we find out who the new governor is or who the repeat governor is. So thank you very much. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, Atlantic City Electric, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, and Prager Metis. Great sponsors as always. And one quick reminder to everybody, we have a very significant event coming up on November the 10th at the Pines Manor in Edison. It's a very big diversity celebration in New Jersey that we are co-hosting with the African American Chamber. It could be a very significant event in New Jersey from the standpoint of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hope you will all be there. It's going to be a very, very important event for our state. So if you'd like to participate and join, you can contact anybody of your member rep with the chamber or go to our website and get that information. But again, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Tom, for your McLaughlin imagery, and you did a wonderful job as usual. And we look to having another one of these events possibly right after the election to get everybody's take on what we can expect from our new governor. But thank you very much, and everybody, please have a great day.
All right, bye.
Bye all.
Bye.